morning. We are doing the impact of the US crisis of capitalism, part 1. The impact on the rest of the world. So the Great Depression did not only affect the United States, it spread across the globe. After World War I, Europe's economic recovery had relied heavily on loans from the United States. But even before the American economy collapsed, the US began recalling these loans, so the Europeans had no safety net. This created serious problems for Europe, where many businesses and industries, just like in America, were built more on speculation. And remember, speculation means people did risky investments and did not have real productive power. When the American stock market crashed, this fragile system collapsed too, dragging the rest of the world's economy down. So by 1931, American banks started withdrawing money from Europe. This forced the selling of European currencies and caused the collapse of many banks across the continent. In countries such as Austria and Germany, major banks failed soon after the American crisis. So investment across most of the industrial West dried up, meaning that businesses could no longer access the money they needed to expand or survive. And as a result, creditors, so the people or institutions who had loaned money, went bankrupt or were forced to cut back on production drastically. The Depression also shaped the political and economic responses worldwide. In countries such as Germany and Japan, the crisis fueled the rise of militarist governments. So a militarist believes in using military to solve problems, and they support aggressive and regressive. Regressive means backward looking foreign policies. These policies eventually contributed to the outbreak of World War II. In contrast, countries like in the USA and Britain responded by increasing government intervention in the economy. And this shift laid the foundation for the creation of welfare systems where the government have programs to support the citizens or the people within the country when they need it, and more managed economies, which became especially important during and after World War I. The Soviet Union, meanwhile, took a different path. So remember, we did the Soviet Union before this. Stalin continued with his vision of building a socialist industrial society under the strict communist control that we've learned previously. Because the Soviet Union had already cut most of its economic ties with capitalist countries, it was less exposed to the Depression, although the absence of outside investment created severe hardships for the Russian people. It shielded the Soviet economy from completely collapsing in the same way as the Western capitalist countries, but instead unemployment remained low and production steadily increased, highlighting the contrast with the misery in Europe and the USA. The Depression also had a devastating impact on countries in Latin America and other regions that depended heavily on exporting primary products such as raw materials and agricultural goods like coffee, sugar, wheat. These economies had already been struggling in the late 1920s as more efficient farming methods and new technologies increased supply faster than demand. So prices of goods like coffee, sugar, and wheat began to fall. To try and control prices, governments in these countries began to stockpile. So stockpile is where they store goods for later use. However, this strategy depended on loans. You need money to stockpile. They needed loans to do this. And that was from the USA and Europe where they got these loans. And when these loans were recalled, so the loans were not available anymore during the Depression, these stockpiles were suddenly released into the market. But this caused prices to collapse even further, and the incomes of primary producing countries fell drastically.
Thank you, and remember to subscribe.